one or more gather items. 3 is basically designed to reflect HDX's design, and you can see that in this UML diagram, where's the structure of the library. Another important feature of the library is that it uses dictionaries, which should be very familiar to people who use Python. So you can use this simple square bracket notation in order to change metadata within a dataset. So in the example in number 3, we're changing dataset's name, or setting the dataset's name to my dataset. One that's often the case is that data is static. So you might update certain data each time you want to update your data set in HDX. A certain amount of that data doesn't really change. Life a bit easier. It offers the opportunity to load static data from a YAML file, which is the recommended file format because it's particularly human readable, or alternatively a JSON file. And it's possible to toss in a simple Python dictionary if you wish. The various utility functions to make life a bit easier, handling things like dictionary merging and loading of multiple YAML JSON files and other helpful tasks. One often forgotten about when people are writing code is configuration and also the logging. Particularly, people fall back on print statements for logging. And so I wanted them to make it easy for people to without having to rely on print statements, and instead using the sort of proper way to output information using logging. So the library makes it a breeze to get started with logging, and provides a few handlers in the default configuration to get you going very quickly. Handlers that you have the option to use if you stick with the default configuration is an email handler. So what this one will do is if your code fails for reason, then you'll be sent an email. So this is quite good if it's running as a sort of cron job or some kind of process on a server. So be notified if there's a failure. In the configuration, that's going to be as simple as possible. It's a configuration class that handles the HDX API key. HDX API key allows you to basically a form of authorization that allows you to connect to HDX and put data into HDX. So the configuration handles that key and also the merging of multiple configurations. It itself uses logging to try to make it clear what's happening as the library is running. And, when an error occurs in the library, there's an exception rather than just returning a false or a none. So that it's clear that some kind of error has occurred, and within that exception there'll be a message which should give a good indication of what has gone wrong. The objectives was to help people to get started as quickly as possible, and with that in mind there are facades to simplify the setup. So hide the setup of logging. And if you use ScraperWiki, which is just internally in HDX, but then there's also calls to ScraperWiki are hidden as well. cause libraries to not get used is when poorly documented. So from the outset, a major objective was to ensure that the code is extremely well documented. So there is a detailed API documentation available to describe what every method does, what its arguments are, and what its return values are. Have a suitable IDE like PyCharm. It can take advantage of the documentation of the library and give some hints. Another feature that should help users are the arguments and return parameters type hints. So you may not have heard of this, but in Python 3.5, there's this new feature of type hints. And basically what these hints are doing is helping you to understand what is the type of the object that you're passing into a method, the correct type that you should be passing in, or what type would you expect back after you've called a method. I expect the return value type to be. And it again use a suitable IDE like PyCharm, then will actually use type hints, helping you to see if you're passing in the wrong type of values into a method call. Let's check the methods often have default parameters. So if you sort of stick to the default way of doing things, it should be fairly easy to get going. Show you where it is. So code is on GitHub. It's within a repository which is or organization which is called OCHA DAP, and the repository is called HDX Python API. A comprehensive README that you see if you scroll down, and the usage of the library and how to get going and various other things. So first, the API documentation, which is available as a link off the README. The API documentation, and you can see that it's quite detailed. You can quickly find what parameters are expected in a method and what a method does and what the return types are. So talk a little bit through an example. Before I go into the example, I want to go back to this API key. The API is expected to be in a file called .hdx_key, which is located in the current user's home directory. So find that key by going to the HDX website. And then your profile. So if again you click, after you've logged in, click on your profile. If you scroll down on the bottom left, you'll see API key private, and this is the thing that you should copy. So paste it into a text file and save it as .dx_key. In your library, that's all that's needed as far as the API key is concerned. Install the library. The library it doesn't have a release version, it's in testing. So you can just take the latest version from Git. You can do that by pip installing using the git plus line, or adding that line into your requirements.txt file. I mention here, and it's rather important, that HDX Python library only works with Python 3, not with Python 2, and that is because of the type hinting with feature of Python 3, and it has been backported to earlier Python 3 versions than 3.5, but doesn't work properly in Python 2. If pip install the library, you get some errors. It's most likely because of a dependency of the library, which is a cryptography package, and they have to install some additional libraries. And there's a link to the cryptography dependency, so you can see what those are. Now, well, firstly, is everyone with me so far?
Yeah, I think we are. Sure.
Okay. Now I will go through an example from scratch. Hopefully, being a live example, it won't run into issues. If we go briefly back to the API, if you've copied it on the HDX website, you can just, if you're in your home directory, type the line that I put in the terminal. Can everybody see that line? Is that clear, or do I need to enlarge this and make it bigger?
I think it's clear enough, Mike.
Okay. So if you type in a line that's shown in the terminal, replacing X's obviously with your API key, then it will create the appropriate file. I'm going to set up a virtual environment. If you're familiar with this, the idea is simply to create a sandbox to work in, so that when you install additional libraries, it doesn't pollute your main Python installation. So it's generally a good idea to do this when you're working on a project. Virtual env itself, if it's already installed on your system. For Linux users, you just use sudo apt-get install virtualenv for that. And Windows users, there'll be some similar process. To activate your virtual environment, we can install it itself. Without following all these instructions, they are actually available in README that I just showed you. So you don't have to write all this down. It's all in README. So you install the library and its dependencies. And if part fails and you get an error message, this is where this is down to the dependencies of library that Python API depends on, which is called cryptography, and you need to get the dependencies for that library. We'll launch Python.
Manage is only me, but you are a bit away from the microphone. If you can just approach a little bit more.
Okay, so can you now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. So the first step is to import the classes that we will use. So a configuration class. We need to import the configuration class and the dataset class for this example. The next step is to create a configuration, and that's a simple process. We just create configuration and pass parameters now. But the configuration will work against the production website. But because this is a demonstration, we want to work against the test website. And I ask when you're experimenting that you also work against the test website rather than the production website. So that you need to include this parameter HDX site and set it to test. And with any configuration of our own for this particular example, so we just pass in an empty dictionary. If we didn't pass in this dictionary, then the configuration would assume that you have a configuration file in your config folder. So the default in this case, the configuration assumes you need a configuration, so you don't want to have one. So we pass in an empty configuration. Now we read a data set from HDX, and so ones that is interest or could be interest would be this ACLED conflict data for Africa. So we normally test HDX website, and this is the data set for ACLED. And metadata, there are two resources, an Excel file and a zipped CSV file. Read that data set. The that's name actually in the title. So I mean in the URL after the slash after data set. So it's ACLED -click -data -for -Africa -realtime -2016. So we're reading the data set. We can to show that we've read it. And here you see a ton of information come back. This is all the metadata for the data set and also for the resources underneath. So one of the things that we might be interested in is the dataset date. So it's currently set to the 25th of June 2016. Note it's in the sort of US format with the month first and the day second. But that's the format, so you have to stick with that when you set the dataset date. So let's change this date. It's really quite simple to do this. Set it to our new date. So in this case, I'm setting it to the 26th of July 2015. Just confirm that it's actually changed, just to be absolutely sure. And actually update HDX. So just setting the date doesn't change it in HDX. The step that actually called the update in HDX is this one, the update in HDX method. The calling this method, which is interacting with HDX. It's saying correctly that resources already exist and a gallery item exists because the data we've downloaded has all this information, all the resources. Put it back in, it observes that they already are there, and it dates them. If we go back to this data set in HDX, we can see the original date was June the 25th, 2016, and if we now refresh to July the 26th, 2015. And so I'll just change it back to what it was before. So to go through as far as a simple example is concerned, and if you go into the README of the on GitHub, the steps that I showed you are under the heading "A quick example." So you can follow through these steps in your own time, and in that way understand how HDX works, and then further down, there's much more information about the facades and customizing the configuration, configuring logging, if you want to do something more sophisticated or at least different to the defaults. There's a bit of information that's well worth reading about operations on HDX objects. And also on data sets specifically. And there's a working example. Actually, it's a bit of a stretch to call it a working example. It basically is something to help you get started. But if you're building a project, this gives you beginning of a project, a skeleton. That basically allows you to create a data set, but the actual creation of the data set occurs in this function, generate data set, and you would have to write the code for that. So, but a complete example, there is one. There's the ACLED code, which is in GitHub, and there's a link to it here. And I'll show it in the IE. The code that we use internally for pulling data from ACLED, this code uses the HDX Python library. And here, this run.py is using the scraper wiki facade. In your case, you would most likely just use the simple facade, but it will be very similar to this. And if you did stuff up above, which is really trying to construct a URL to the resource, this create data set are down the bottom, and also the steps that are creating resources. This is for the dynamic part of the data. Data set has some data that will change every time this code runs, and other data that's static. So the data that's static is this HDX dataset static file. So you can see it's in a very simple format. So in the library, you can quickly get started and be able to read and write from HDX. I think I'll there. So if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to take them.
I think that was very interesting and it was very good. It was very nice how you take us to all the documented steps. So opening the floor now for questions.
And for Mike. So, Mike, I have a question because I've been working with R, not Python. So I just, it seems very simple for somebody who has never worked with Python, just R. But I also wanted to ask, like, what's for a user, let's say like me, if I wanted to interact with data sets, what I can and can't do as a user who's logged into HDX, what's my flexibility here, and what are my limitations?
Do you mean using this library, or are you talking more generally about HDX?
I'm thinking about the library.
Okay. The library as it currently stands allows you to read data sets, resources, and key items from HDX. It also allows you to obviously change and manipulate that data, and it allows you to update the data in HDX, and also to create data afresh in HDX, so you can create new data sets. But there are some features that are coming in my to-do. So, important features which I've yet to implement, but which I think is quite important, is the ability within the library to search for data sets and resources. So something that will come soon in a new version. Another feature I intend to implement is that there is any way to go through the version history of an HDX object like a data set. So I intend to introduce functionality to look at the version history in future. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
I have one question, Mike, for you. You show us how to get the string of CSV or an Excel file, but is this library also able to extract JSON or GeoFiles information from HDX?
Yes, I mean there's no restriction on the resources. That's no problem. It can deal with any resource type.
Any format. Okay, great. Thanks. Any question for Mike?
I see a question that's been posted on the chat from Amadou.
Yep.
Is there a way to extract tabular data from a data set object into a pandas data frame? And will it be possible? At the moment, there isn't integration with pandas. And it's good you bring up these sorts of questions, because it will be helpful for us to get feedback about the kind of features that would be useful to you in the library. So for example, having tabular data automatically extracted into pandas is something that you would handy. Then please get in touch with us, and we can put that on our do list.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amadou. Let me see. Okay.
Anything else?
Momar, you have the floor.
Yeah. So my question is, for Mike, you talked about the creation of new dataset by using the library. So I would like to know if it is possible, for example, to create this dataset from another source, from another data portal, and we get this same dataset user library to the HDX.
I mean, it's possible, but it would require a certain amount of coding. It wouldn't be an automatic step. So whether the other portal has some kind of library for getting the information from it, because the HDX Python library is designed specifically for HDX. It's not a sort of generic library for all data portals. The library that would be, of course, is the CKAN library itself, which can deal with all CKAN data portals at least. So the steps would be that you would extract the information from the other data portal and try to put it into a dictionary or a YAML file or something like that, using the metadata that HDX expects. And then you would push the information into HDX. So there would be a certain amount of coding required to do that. It wouldn't be an automatic process. You're welcome.
Mike, anybody else? Laurent, you raised your hand before. Okay, Laurent, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. So the question is, it actually based on CKAN, or you did a lot of customization within CKAN? Like, would this library work with other CKAN instances?
The library is designed to work with HDX only. I mean, the library itself uses the CKAN Python library on the, but it's designed to basically reflect the format of HDX rather than other data portals.
Production.
Okay. Hey, this is Laurent. Thanks for the clear explanations. Seems really simple to implement, and we'll probably give it a try soon with the Humanitarian Data Portal. I have just a few quick questions. So the first thing, I was looking at the GitHub repository. I can't see your Python script for the test, the ACLED thing. Is it possible to put it on GitHub?
Yeah. So sorry, what is it that you're not able to see? Is it the HDX scraper? Sorry, the ACLED example. Is that the one that you're not able to get to?
Exactly, the Python side. Actually, there's a folder for working example, but I was expecting that file to be there.
You can contact me afterwards, and we can go through this
Right.
and make that available.
Okay. Something else. Probably I missed something about the tags associated to the data that we upload to HDX. How can we customize that? And is the API key identifying us as our organization?
The API key actually will identify you as user within an organization. So the API key is no organization. It's for the user.
I want to automate some upload of data to HDX through API. I would create a user that would be related to our organization, and that's in the created API key that would upload things on behalf of the organization, right?
That would be to do it, yes. I mean, we've had some discussions internally about this because to date we've typically just used our own personal API keys rather than doing things in this programmatic way and having a sort of special API key for programs. But I would recommend having a separate API key for programs. So exactly as you say.
Right.
And then the tags. It's still shared. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so with this ACLED example, I have tags in the static metadata. So you can tags basically a list of dictionaries where the dictionaries basically consist of name and then the name of the tag. So you can name conflict, political violence, protests, and war in this particular example. So tags would appear in HDX if you push this.
Right. Okay. So probably we're working on making those tags dynamic, put some data source. Okay. Thanks. I have a last question, which is about making support for hexal tagging. We have some way to implement some automated hexal tagging as part of the code.
Not currently, but this is an interesting idea that you bring up. So again, this kind of feedback is very helpful. So we can sort of talk about this too as well, and we can put that on the to-do list.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Nice to see you here. Let me see. Mike, did you answer this one from Amadou? He put it in the chat, but I think you.
Okay. So when using the API, we only access our. Okay. So if you use the API, you should be able to access all the data sets that are on HDX, apart from the ones that have been purposely set to be private, which is a pretty limited number of data sets. So all public data sets on HDX are available to you.
Thank you, Mike. So let me see. I think we don't have more questions. Anybody else? Oh, Anna. Okay, so you have the floor, Anna.
Hi, I have a question, Mike, is about visualization. If there is now the possibility of creating visualizations through the API, that's reviewed for the future or something like that, should be maybe possible.
It depends what you, because if you wish to create a sort of JavaScript visualization, then can do that. Then can do that through the current the CKAN JSON API that's available. So it is already possible to do visualizations. With the small sort of issue, if you like, that the CKAN format is not exactly matching the way HDX does things, but you can talk to our developers and they will give you a lot of help about how to do that. So you can do visualizations with JavaScript, and of course with the HDX Python Library, you can bring down and do visualizations. They wouldn't be base, but you'd be able to do local visualizations and play around in pandas and these sorts of tools.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if it was possible to, let's say, upload a data set, and I want to show this data set in a map, like the visualization that you have already in the website, or if this is currently something that only HDX team can do the website.
To actually embed things into the website would require our developers to do it. I think we have some of our developers on the call, so they might be better placed to answer this question than I am, but knowledge they will need to embed visualizations in HDX.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So let me see. Do we have another question? I don't see. So yeah, okay, and we are already reaching our limit. So if there are no more questions, I just want to the session. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the webinar. It was very interesting. I have a recording, so if any of you would like to have the recording, I can email it to you. It's a big file, as you can imagine, but I'll be more than happy to send it to you. And also if you have questions, you can always reach us at xdx@un.org or xdxfeedback@gmail.com. So you can always get our support. So yeah, so this, I think we are ready to go. Thank you for joining, and be in touch. Our next webinar is coming in maybe 4 weeks, and we promise it's going to be also an interesting one. So, but for now, thanks so much. Thank you, Mike.
For listening.
Bye.